Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm excited for the guest that I have on today. She's not a dad, she's a mom, but she's just written a new book and she's going to talk about it and show how it applies to not only her and can help you, but also how she's incorporated it into her own family as well. But my good friend Dana White has joined me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for this conversation because you're a best-selling author. You've got a few books out that kind of are all in the same area. Um, so let's start off with this. My listeners, viewers who don't know who you are, let's talk a little bit about who you are, kind of how you grew up and how you got into what you're doing now. And then obviously this is a parenting podcast, so I want to hear about your family as well.
Well, on a cold day in January 1974, I uh, I grew up in a Christian home. I now understand the gift that I had in parents who truly lived out their faith and sought to live out their faith in every aspect of life. I thought that was normal. I now know that's not normal. So I'm very thankful for that. My parents were incredibly supportive and active in my life. I think that gave me the confidence. I put them in the acknowledgments of probably every book, but this book specifically, I now write about the thing that I hid for years, right? Like I was born messy, and my parents did their best to parent that out of me, right? But uh, I now write about that and share about that. And it is my deep, dark secret. I mean, obviously, we'll get into how now I get it, right? And I didn't used to get it. But I feel like it was their parenting that brought me to the point and allowed me to be able to put this out into the world, right? Like the confidence that they gave me, the unconditional love. Um, but yeah, so in 2009, I started blogging and I wanted to be a writer. I had been a theater arts teacher before I had kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I thought, okay, writing is the thing I want to do as a creative outlet and maybe a career at some point. And then I discovered blogs. I discovered them in 2008. Do you remember the days when like you didn't know what a blog was,
Right.
right? Like, so I remember finding my first blog and going, oh, this is it. This is what I have to do. But I didn't start it for a year and a half because my house was a total disaster. It had always been a disaster. Like that was a struggle my entire life. And I had tried so hard to get it under control, but I was like, I have got to figure that out before I start a blog because I know myself. I throw myself into projects and I thought that'll be one more thing to take my focus away from my house. So I tried for that year and a half to get my house under control. Excuse me, I'm having a little cold. Um, I tried for a year and a half. And I mean, now I had different motivation, right? Like before, I wanted to do it for all the right reasons. Now I wanted to do it because there was this thing I was desperate to do and it was holding me back, right? And it was the day before my second child, he's now how old is he? 21. It was the day before he went to kindergarten. I have three kids. And I was in church and I was like, this is the time for me to start a blog, right? Like, this is the time. And yet, I still had not been able to conquer this messiness issue. And I was praying. I was not listening to the sermon, but I was praying and I was frustrated with God. And I just was crying out in my heart saying, why have you not fixed me? Why have you not answered my prayer? Because it's keeping me from doing this thing that I felt called by God to do. And so it didn't make any sense to me, right? And uh and God just said, write about that. And so I started writing about that anonymously in the beginning. Didn't tell anybody I knew what I was doing. I didn't even tell my husband what I was doing because I just figured this would be one more thing to fail, right? It was also my embarrassing secret. I didn't want anyone to know what I was doing, but also because it was anonymous, I was completely honest. Like I stopped pretending that it wasn't that bad. I didn't hide anything because nobody was reading it, right? um, and then people did start reading it, and here we are 15 years later. And in the beginning, I had no intentions of teaching anyone anything because I was just trying to figure it out. And I thought that would be ridiculous for someone to learn about this stuff from me. It took about 2.5 years of people saying, please teach us what you're doing, and me saying, why would you want to learn from me? To finally get to the point where I realized, oh, okay, I have something of value to share. I can um, I can't tell someone how to have a perfect house. I still don't do that, but I can help the completely hopeless, bumfuzzled person like I was go from, why is this so hard, to, oh, that's how you do it. Right. And so that is my special place in the world. That's the thing that ultimately God designed me to do from the very beginning. I just had to come to the end of my own rope, or whatever the phrase is, to get to the point where I was willing to do the thing, because it didn't make sense, right? Like, it made no sense for me to write about this. Um, but here we are.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. When it comes to, you're talking about cleaning your own house,
Mhm.
there, that could be a metaphor for, cleaning up you internally, fixing you before you try to work on anything else around you. But that could also mean actually cleaning up your house.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I have to stop you just because I get the brain, because it's my brain, of the person who's completely overwhelmed, right? And so it does feel like, when you are so confused by what is going on, it feels like I got to figure this out first. That was actually a big part of my problem,
mhm,
was trying to figure out what to do and how to do it and have the perfect plan, when in reality, what I needed to do was my dishes,
right,
right? Like, I needed to go ahead and do that. I needed to start throwing away trash before I figured out how everything was going to end up, right? I needed to go ahead and do the smallest, teeniest, tiniest thing. And what happened was, through doing that, then I started to understand, and a big part of this book, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House, which is my new book coming out, is the fact, is the reality that God showed me through this process. I had always thought, I'm missing something spiritually. If this is so hard for me, I must be missing something spiritually, because isn't a Christian mom supposed to love this stuff? Right? Like, isn't that part of being a great mom? And yet, it was such a struggle for me that it made me feel like I'm living my dream. I'm the Christian mom I want to be, and yet I can't seem to do this thing. And God showed me, Dana, I don't care about your messy house. I care about your heart. Like, where is your heart? Okay. But I learned that as I both grew closer to Jesus, and as a totally separate thing, worked on my house. And then, of course, they work together because Jesus is part of everything, right? But anyway, I get a little passionate about that because I know how I was, right? Like, I wanted to be like, what internal thing do I need to fix first? There were internal things to fix, but I needed to do my dishes first. Like, that was the thing that actually moved me toward being able to figure things out. Sorry, I get a little
yeah.
passionate about that.
No, I think you're right. I think
Yeah.
just getting into the movement of actually doing what you should be doing, instead of sitting there thinking about it or worrying about it or stressing about it, is just
Hmm.
actually doing it. I know people that will, they have a game plan in mind on what they want to do, and they'll spend days or weeks jotting down a plan
Yep.
of how to do what they want to do, when they could have just started the
That
actual
was me. That's exactly what
two
I
weeks
did.
ago and be two
Right.
weeks ahead of schedule. So,
Yep.
um, so when it comes to you and your family, I mean, this is something that your family had to get used to. Uh-oh, mom's changed. She's a new
Yeah.
person. She's moving things around in the house. What do we do? How did that go with your family?
So I'm the same person. And actually, that was the thing that ultimately helped me change my house, was accepting that, oh, my brain doesn't work the way that the brains of naturally organized people work. I mean, like, I had to figure out what did work for me. So as far as my kids go, though, like, one of the it made them nervous because my kids were, I had taught them without wanting to teach them this. I had taught them that we cleaned up the house when people were coming over, right? And so working on the house was like, well, who's coming over, right?
Right.
And so I, for years, I would say the summer before, so I started in August. That summer before, I had set my kids down. They were 3, 5, and 7 at the time. And I had a chart, I had stickers, and I had what I thought was the simplest thing I could do of how we were going to change everything in our home starting today. Right? Like today, kids, this is it. What it failed miserably, like it always had before. And what I realized was they had no frame of reference for what I was envisioning because what our house was like was their normal, right? Like they didn't know. So when I started to work on my routines, right? In the beginning, I was just like, I don't know how other people do it, but they don't seem to have to spend 5 hours excavating their kitchen when they are going to clean house. Like their kitchens are just basically clean all the time, right? And I was like, I don't know how they do it. I'm just going to focus on the dishes. I tried to start as small as I could because I was sure I was going to fail, right? And so I started that way. And the gift of this being anonymous and not telling my family what I was doing in the beginning was part of God's plan, right? Because it forced me to focus on what I was doing, what I wasn't doing, and the impact of what I was doing and wasn't doing, right? Like I saw that impact and I created routines and I started to realize what I call dishes math, which is I thought since it took me 5 hours to clean up my kitchen after 5 days of not doing the dishes, that it must take an hour a day to do the dishes. And who has an hour a day to do the dishes, right? Like that was my thought process. Did you know it takes like 10 to 15 minutes to do the dishes if you do them every day? It doesn't work out mathematically, but that's how it works, right? And so I was learning things and I was figuring out, and I was learning that if I will run my dishwasher after dinner and I will open it, and I will, unload it first thing in the morning and then put dishes in it throughout the day, my kitchen never gets out of control. I had to learn that and experience it because I know there are people listening who maybe were like me and are like, it's probably not that way for me, right? That's me, right? So I had to experience it and really go, okay, and create the routines and then bring my kids in on the routines, right? Partly so that I actually knew what it was that I needed to do because I didn't know before, and partly because they needed to have seen it and have a frame of reference for this. It wasn't like, okay, I need y'all to take your dishes to the sink. And they're thinking, okay, well, the sink is already piled high. How am I going to get my dishes, in there? So it's just getting those routines down first myself was absolutely essential, to actually bringing my kids in on that.
Mm. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the dishwasher. We are like that. We do the dishes every night. Dishwasher's running every night, and then first thing in the morning, it's either me or my wife putting
Mhm.
dishes away in the morning. So the dishwasher's empty when before we leave for the day and go about our
Mhm.
business. But there
And if
are
you haven't done that before, it's life changing. And
yeah.
and my mom had a house that was under control and had, I did chores all growing up. She taught me these things. And it just, I'm going to be honest, because I have one of my kids that I think struggles in this way a little bit too. I thought there's got to be a better way than that. Like, that was my thought. Like, there has to be a better way than just doing the dishes. I have to have a smart, and I was always trying to come up with some better way when in reality, I just had to do the dishes.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
how did you come up with the title for the book?
This book,
Yes.
Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. So my previous three books have not included spiritual content because God had showed me so clearly that this is not a spiritual issue. Okay. I am not mad about your messy house. We need to take that shame away because when you turn it into a spiritual issue, then you take this thing that feels undoable and unconquerable to someone, and then you add on spiritual guilt, And now all of a sudden I'm like, not only am I a failure at this thing, now also I feel like I'm a spiritual failure too. I mean, so God was just very clear, like we need to don't make this a spiritual thing. Okay. So I wrote my several books, first three books that way. But the reality is I have a big platform. My books have done really well. And Jesus is the most important thing in my life, right? And so I want to have this out there. And the reason the title is so blunt, Jesus doesn't care about your messy house, is people know me for being very, boil it down, very honest. And I'm like, I'm not going to trick anybody into reading a book about Jesus, right? Like, that's not my goal.
Mhm.
You're going to know from the title, there are no surprises here. This book is about Jesus. This book is not about decluttering. I talk about decluttering and what it's taught me about Jesus, but it is a book about Jesus, you know. So that's why it was very important to me to just be very clear and very blunt so that people knew exactly what this book was about.
No, got it. That's awesome. Let me ask you this though, when it comes to your platform now, you, I know that you coach people on decluttering, and how does that process work?
So I have a 5-step decluttering process, which I developed as I decluttered truckloads of stuff from my own house. I mean, I was going from every space in my home being a disaster and at least two spaces being unusable at any given time, right? Because I would clean out one space, move everything into a different room, and then that room was unusable. And then I would clean out that room and then I move it anyway. So I had to break through my own feelings of just being completely um, stopped by my feeling of being overwhelmed. And so I developed a process that I used in my own home. And when I wrote Decluttering at the Speed of Life, I put it into 5 steps and I named those steps. And those steps work very, very well for everybody. I mean, honestly. So it's a 5-step process that can work in any situation, any level of clutter, any amount of time that you have, and that's the point, right? Is that you're going to make progress and only progress. And so I teach that method, through my podcast and videos and all that kind of stuff. But I had a lot of people who would say, "I need you to come to my house," and I was like, "Well, I." Writing books and making videos and making podcasts and answering questions takes a lot of time. And I can't physically go to people's houses to do that. I do for YouTube, but like that would be a whole nother full-time job, right? And I'm only one person. And so I started training and certifying decluttering coaches. So at declutteringcoaches.com, that's my site. And everybody there is trained in this method because it works exceptionally well with other people because it takes the emotions out, which then takes out the power play, right? And this, a lot of my people maybe have hired somebody in the past to help them who came in and said, "You should do this, this, and this." And they're like, "I'm completely overwhelmed." What they really needed to do was declutter. But also, we're highly creative people and we see something that other people would think is trash. And we're like, "Oh no, that's not trash," right?
Right.
But this method allows for that and is like, you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything. And here's how we determine what you can actually keep and your space stay under control, right? And so, because it takes the emotions out, because it is leading somebody through a process where they're the ones determining what has value and what doesn't, then it works really well with other people. So it works well for people to coach them through using that method.
Oh, that's cool. So you have coaches that actually go to people's houses and help them do that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, well, from a parenting, uh, I guess, perspective, or from a parenting standpoint, when you got little kids that, you tell them to clean up their room and it takes them a couple hours to do it, or they don't do it.
Yeah.
Is there any methods that you used as you were decluttering to get your own kids to clean up their rooms?
Yeah,
I'm sure they
absolutely.
had to
So
declutter.
yeah, yeah. Um, so my 5-step decluttering process works really well for anybody. um, for children and for me. That's why I'm always like, it works really well with children and with me. But anyway, um, it, the issue is often like we talked about before, not having a frame of reference for what exactly we're talking about here. Like, what do you mean when you say clean the room? So that's too broad of a thing. So the first step of my decluttering process is start with the trash. So sending them in or sitting there with them and saying, okay, we've got our trash bag. I like to use a black trash bag so you don't see what you put inside it and second guess yourself, right? A recycling bin, if you have one, go in there and let's just get rid of trash. And here's the key with kids is let them decide what's trash. And that's what's really hard as a parent, right? Because we're like, are you kidding me? You don't think this is trash, right? Well, that makes people like me and kids hold on tighter because we're like, how do you not see the gum wrapper? I can't articulate why this gum wrapper is special to me, but this gum wrapper is special. And if you don't see that, then you don't understand me and blah, blah, So we say, let's start with trash and let them determine what's trash. Oh, there's no trash. Well, let's just look around. Is this trash? No. Okay. All right. So we move on, right? Because if you go through the process, you're going to get through everything, right? Then the next step is easy stuff, which is what already has a home. What do you know what to do with? Okay. And let's move those things to the places that you already know that they go. And then we go, and you can go through the process and it leads you all the way through. The best thing with children is the container concept. Okay.
Mm.
So I would have been offended if someone had told me that I didn't know what containers were for. I would have been like, of course I know what containers are for. Who doesn't know what containers are for? They're for putting things in. Well, that's not what they're for. They're not for putting things in. They're actually meant to serve as limits. Okay. So as I was talking to myself while I was decluttering one day, I was like, container, container. And I went, contain. Oh, a container is supposed to contain, like firefighters contain a fire. They create a boundary. They can keep it inside the boundary. They can keep it under control. If it goes outside the boundary, bad things happen, right? And so I realized, oh, okay, so the container is meant to be the limit. And if I try to keep more than will fit in the container, then it doesn't stay under control. And anyway, that carries on out to like, oh, okay, every drawer is a container, every shelf is a container, every closet rod is a container. And the beauty of that is that it's outside of me. And so it works really well with other people because I am not saying you can't keep so many stuffed animals. Instead, I'm saying this is the place that we have for stuffed animals. With my daughter, when she was young, she's in college now, but when she was young, we had something kind of like this. And we made the 3 shelves her stuffed animal container. Okay. And that was fun, right? Because her stuffed animals were on there and she got to see them and it made the room look cute. And I said, okay, let's put your favorite ones on first. Well, that's fun, right? Like it's fun to put your favorite ones on there first, pick them out and it's all good, positive feelings. And I'm not judging, even though I'm like, you're going to pick that one and the one that you got when you were in the hospital, you don't even care about, I mean, like I'm not going to say any of that. I'm just like, the container is the one making the decisions. So I'm not judging any of her stuff. She's just picking out what she wants. And then the beauty of it is when it's full, I still get to say yes to everything. So when she says, and I say, oh, it's full. Okay, well, then the other ones, we need to let those go and go to the thrift store so that, or donate them to whatever so that, somebody else can enjoy them. And even if she's horrified by that, and she says, oh, I have to keep this one, I get to say, oh, absolutely. Okay, which one do we get rid of so that there's room for that? Oh, I don't want to get rid of any. Oh, oh man. Okay, well, I mean, there's no room for it. It's not me saying you shouldn't keep that stuffed animal. You have too many stuffed animals. It's letting the space be the bad guy. And that's so helpful as parents are when we're, helping our kids in their spaces. And it's helpful for all of us, right? Just to let the container be the decision maker. And just going through that process. And then you can, you can cry with them over how sad it is that there's not enough room. That doesn't change the fact that there's not enough room, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. And until they're smart enough to say, well, we just need to get another container.
no, I no. So the reality is that the room is a container too, right? And so there's a limit to that. And so if they say, well, we gotta, but there's a container over here. Okay, great. So you want to keep more stuffed animals? Perfect. We'll donate all your Barbies. What? Well, but that's the space that we need. You can keep, and that's why I always tell people, you can keep anything. You just can't keep everything, right? And so if you want stuffed animals on every single container that you have in your room, great. But you can't have that and the other stuff because there's just not enough room. And so you let the room be a container that determines how many shelves can be in there, but the number one thing in the container is the person, right? And the things that you need to do in this space, which means there needs to be open floor space for you to be able to play with these things, right?
Yeah. Well, my boys are older. They're in their 20s. My older son's 26 and my younger son's 23. So yeah, I don't have those issues anymore. But it was kind of that power struggle where, sometimes we'd have to sit there and I mean, there were times where we would take a trash bag in and go, okay, you're not picking up your room, you're not cleaning up the stuff off the floor. It's just going to go in the trash and be gone. And it's amazing how fast they work when you tell them that kind of stuff. But um,
But giving them the tools too, though, of like when you go from trash all the way to the container, meaning you're going to get out anything that doesn't need to be in here, but you're going to do it in a way where it eliminates that power struggle. And that's my thing that I teach is the power struggle is natural, right? Because you're a
mhm,
parent and a child, but this is how you work through this stuff without the power struggle, right? Because it's a process. It's an actual process to go from whatever disaster status that you're at to, okay, everything has an actual place to be. And then the goal is, and letting them know this goal the whole time is our goal is that a 5 minute pickup gets this space back under control. And so then if 5 minute pickups are not getting it back under control, and you give them a little bit of time to learn to do that, but if it's not getting it back under control, then you're like, well, then we have too much stuff. So we have to get rid of more. And then it's still not, so it gives you that actual goal of how to measure whether they're under their clutter threshold. And that's another big thing with parenting is everybody has a clutter threshold,
mhm.
right? Like, and what that means, it's not what you prefer, it's what you can handle. And I made it up, but it is. It's like everybody has an amount of stuff they can handle, and yours is different from your child's. Your children's are different from each other's. Mine was very different from my mom. And so my mom would try so hard to help me get organized, but the reality was I couldn't handle the amount of stuff that she could handle. My personality doesn't allow me to have as much stuff as she had. And so while she can put it in all these neat little things and need to get something out of the back and move something and get it out of the back and then neatly put it back, I'm never going to do that. I want to. I like it like that. I want to keep all this stuff, but the reality is my personality needs me to open up the cabinet and there's four things that I can get one without moving anything.
Right.
And so acknowledging that if your kid is having a lot of trouble keeping their room under control, it's because they have too much stuff. My mom didn't know that. She knows now because she's read my books, but she didn't know that. And so she would try and try and try to help me be organized when in reality, I just needed to declutter. I needed less stuff in my house
Yeah.
and
I
my
think
space.
as you're talking about decluttering and like opening up closets or cabinets, I think about my wife cleaned out there's a bathroom, we have a bathroom closet in our master bathroom, and it was the shelves, there's like four shelves, really large shelves in the closet, and they were kind of cluttered. And she spent like a Sunday, like a whole day just going through it. And I mean, I think she threw out three-quarters of the stuff that was in there. But now the shelves are all nice. But I look around and I go, well, that's great. But we have like four or five other closets that we need to do that with because we do. I mean, we got in the master bedroom, the closet in the master bedroom, there's kind of some clutter in there on some shelves. We have a hallway closet that's got clutter in there, and it's like, yeah, so we have to get that stuff because like it's like you said, we can't open up that hallway closet if we're looking for something without moving a bunch of stuff to get to what we need to get to. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that we all it's doesn't have to
Oh,
be
it's
spring
something everybody
cleaning,
has to
right?
deal with. Yeah,
Doesn't have to be.
everybody always has clutter. And that's actually a huge thing for me was realizing there was not a finish line.
Right.
Like the way people live in houses without clutter is that they declutter all the time, forever and always. Like I thought, okay, I'm going to get to this point where this is no longer something I have to do. When am I going to be finished decluttering? But accepting that, no, 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 you're going to have to keep decluttering your whole life as long as you're living was like, oh, okay. Because then I didn't feel like I had failed when I had to declutter again. I was like, wait a minute, I already decluttered this closet. How am I
Right.
having to declutter it again?
Right.
That's just life. That's how it goes.
Um, what about your kids with their organizational skills? Has it helped with that when it comes to them being organized, not only at home, but maybe when they were younger at school and stuff like that?
I mean, your kids are older, so I how do I say this? They are their own people. They have their own personalities. I don't one of them is my video editor, but I don't like, I decided when probably I'm trying to think. I don't know. I started when they were 3, 5, and 7. I probably decided about 4 years in that they were not going to be the subject of what I was talking about, because they have their own lives and their own feelings and their own interpretation of their lives, right? But I will say, especially like when my boys went to college and even my daughter, but I went as minimal as I could possibly go on that because as far as helping them pack. And with the after the first one, I learned with the second one, he had to do the packing himself because can I just tell you this is so funny. So, I don't know, did you hear about like the snowmageddon that happened in Texas in
Uh-huh.
2021?
Uh,
Like everything was really
yeah.
really bad and so my oldest was at college, he was a freshman, and his dorm had no power for uh 4 days, four or
Oh,
five
wow.
days. And it was freezing and the roads stay so icy in Texas because we just don't have the snow plows and things because it so rarely happens. But he he was freezing, like sleeping in his coat, sleeping in anyway, and he brought home at the end of the year two still in the package unopened blankets that had been in his closet. I hope he's okay with me telling this. And I was like, but the issue was that I had, somebody had sent him these blankets as a graduation gift. I think it was my mom. And I had packed for him and stuck them in there. And he didn't know he had them. So anyway, um, but yeah, as far as kids, like the thing that I learned was the threshold issue that we've talked about, right? Like if the playroom when they were little was consistently getting out of control, which before I started this process, it was unusable. Like it was not a playroom. And I decluttered and I decluttered some more and I decluttered some more and I decluttered a lot more and I decluttered a lot more until it got to the point where we had so many fewer toys than we had ever had before, but they were using it now
Hmm.
because it was a play space instead of a toy room. And so changing my mindset of the value of empty open space for living and doing the things that we need to do. That's one of the reasons why one of the things I teach is you've got to define the space, like give it a name because that determines what can happen in there. Like that, like my guest room. I store some things in my guest room, right? But they can't be stored in a way that keeps it from being a guest room, right?
Hmm.
So if this is the play space, I can't have stuff in there that makes it hard to play in there.
Hmm.
So changing that mindset was really powerful and helpful. But also, I am proof that mamas can try really, really hard And ultimately, they're going to have to make this their own at some point. I mean, they're going to have to figure it out. I hope they're farther ahead, you know, because of the work that I've done and the ways that I've helped them. But, it's not that my mom didn't do a great job, but I had to figure this out on my own when I got, so I try to give people hope in that, but also, I mean, as you know, your kids are older. Kids are not a product, right? Like
Right.
we're not creating a product of our children. We are a part of their lives and we're guiding and we're shaping and we're doing what we can as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about when my older son was in college, and he would kill me for telling this story, but my older son was in college and he was, we would go, he went to Grand Canyon University in Arizona, and we would go visit him. We're in California. We'd go visit him, and we'd get to his apartment, and he was sharing an apartment on campus with three other guys. And now keep in mind, these are college boys, right?
I've got two college boys, so I completely understand.
We walk into his apartment, and I just see the trash can with the bag that's just full of trash, right? And then another trash bag next to the trash can, and then stuff piled on the counter, and then dishes are in the sink, like piled up. I mean, the place was just a mess. And my wife was livid. She's like, I cannot believe you guys are living like this. This is ridiculous, And I had to stop her and go, hun, they're college kids. Just
Yeah.
let them be. This is their personal space. Just let them be. We don't live here. This is their
Yeah.
life, and you have to kind of let them kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
And
And figuring it out is the thing that has the big impact, right? Like so many of the things that I have figured out, I basically have just accepted. I'm like, this is not, doing running the dishwasher after dinner is not some new idea.
right,
It's basically just me accepting that that is the way to do it.
right,
And that, yes, there really isn't another way to
yeah.
keep the kitchen under control other than doing the dishes every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I asked my son, hey, do you want me to, you guys are, busy or whatever. Do you want me to run these two trash bags down to the trash can? And my son said, he's like, no, he goes, it's so-and-so's job this time. So he has to do it. And that's why it's sitting there, because he hasn't done it yet. Okay, whatever. I don't have to live here. You guys have to live in it, not me.
Well,
So,
and they're learning so much about life there,
right.
right? Like the whole roommate experience and all that is such life
So
training.
now, so now my son's out of college. He works for a good company and all that. Still in Arizona, but he has his own apartment now, and it's a two-bedroom, two-bath apartment. Lives by himself, and he keeps that place immaculate. So it's just, he's grown up.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
exactly.
he doesn't want to mess. It's so awesome. Well, listen, Dana, if my listeners, viewers want to look you up, learn a little bit more about you, learn a little bit more about decluttering, best places for them to do that.
Well, you can you can just Google Dana K. White. Just put the K in there because do you know who Dana White is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not me. I'm sorry if that's who you thought you were going to interview today. So my kids are like, people have been disappointed. I'm like, oh, I know people have been disappointed because they thought they were interviewing him. That's not me at all. No, you put the K in there if you want to Google it. I'm on YouTube. I have a podcast. My website is a slob comes clean
Nice.
.com, and everything is there. All the links to all the different places. So
Awesome. Well, listen, Dana, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom on decluttering. And I'm going to have to take what you said and do some of that practice here myself at my house. But thank you very much for being on. And I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship.
yeah, this is fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Guys, it's been another episode of Dad Up. I want to give my good friend Dana K. White a nod for being on my show. I appreciate her sharing her wisdom as far as decluttering goes. And listen, if you're looking at possibly decluttering, or you just need a little bit of support or a little bit of guidance, make sure you click on the links below. All her links below. You can check out her YouTube podcast and her website. Go there and you can see exactly what we are talking about more in detail. But another thanks to Dana White for being on the show. And listen, if you're not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at daduppodcast. Until next time, everyone, dad up.